Alright, here we go. What the? This is a Draw My Life video. My name is Fluke the Husky. I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit of who I am and where I came from. I figure a lot of you would be interested in this because I've reached this milestone and I think it's something to be proud of. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this Draw My Life video. So all good stories are told when they have good context. So I'm going to start off my story from a perspective that isn't my own, but for someone that I deeply love and respect, my dad. Let me take you back to the days of when my dad was around my age, except he lived in Colorado and didn't dress up in a dog costume. He was a pin setter at a bowling alley. This was how he was going to meet my mom for the first time, through the back of a bowling alley lane. My mom was a competitive bowler. She would meet up weekly with her team to practice at the bowling alley that my dad worked at. That was when they first found each other. She remembered seeing him setting up the pins back there, but didn't pay any more attention than that. It was only when she picked up her bowling ball and saw a little note stuffed into one of the finger holes that he got her attention. Opening up, it would say something cute and witty, like, "You're cute." It was there that my story begins. Years later, my dad joins the military and is swept into a whirlwind of a life, moving from place to place every few years. I happened to be born when he was stationed in the Netherlands. I was only a few months old before they up and moved to this next base in England. My sister and I went to elementary school there and made a lot of good friends. But after 6 years had passed, it was time to move again. It was hard for both of us, but there was nothing that we could do. So we ended up moving back to America, and we had to relearn a lot of culture, especially how to speak American. I got made fun of a lot in elementary school because of my British accent, so it did not take long for me to lose it. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Colorado. I used to always complain about living there, but I wanted to live close to the ocean, or someplace warmer, or someplace not so dry, or someplace where I can make friends easier. I remember how much I complained to my parents for moving us around, and it seemed as if I was never satisfied. However, after a decade of living there, I realized just how good we had it. We took advantage of living in such a beautiful place. Every year my parents would surprise us on a Friday morning, telling us to pack our clothes because we're not going to school that day. We're going on a trip. We'd wake up at the crack of dawn before the sun would come up and all pack into the car. My sister and I were so tired in the mornings though that my dad would come up with this idea to lay a blanket down on the ground, and all that we would have to do is get out of bed and lay on the blanket. He would wrap us up like a dumpling and carry us out to the car and strap us in. I remember how much fun that was, not knowing where I'm going, but knowing that I'm going someplace new. It was later on in the car, waking up, that I found out that we were going to be skiing. I fell in love with skiing every year with my family, and would get so excited every time that my dad would lay that blanket on the floor for me to wrap myself in on, knowing that we'd be in the snowy Rocky Mountains later that day. I had a pretty normal middle school and high school life. I was a subpar cross-country runner and a track athlete mixed with a band nerd. I was a normal band, not marching band, mind you. My high school was obsessed with marching band. But I was never interested because of how snooty and stuck up the marching band kids were. That kind of made me dislike the arts in general, just because of how stuck up all the kids were. But that all changed senior year when my best friend Carol convinced me to join choir for the first time. That was the best year of high school. Because I used to play guitar and started to sing along with it, I grew to love getting out of my comfort zone and singing with other people. Who knew that would end up being my lifelong passion? I've always been pretty artsy since then. I wish I could have had more time my senior year to explore all my passions, because that was the turning point in my life. I knew right then that I wanted to be a creator the rest of my life. I know what you all might be asking, when was I introduced to the furry fandom? Truthfully, I can't really pinpoint an exact day or event, but I do remember growing up and how much I loved watching movies or playing games that involved talking animals. The earliest movie being Balto, then the Ratchet & Clank games, then Kung Fu Panda. I actually loved that movie so much that I began searching online for more stories and fan art. It was then that I stumbled upon DeviantArt and fan fiction. Now I actually made a few fan fictions of my own, which I'm pretty embarrassed of, to be honest, and made some of my first friends in the furry fandom. 3 of them were artists, and we talked every single day. I didn't know what to contribute on DeviantArt, but I loved taking pictures of beautiful Colorado whenever we would go skiing, so I posted a lot of those. I eventually started this project where I would submit 1 picture a day for 365 days. And I actually completed it. I remember being so proud of my commitment that I wanted to do that for 1,000 days. I completed that as well. I wish I could go back and see all those photos that I posted, but unfortunately I removed my entire gallery for no good reason. Anyways, back to the fandom. I saw on DeviantArt many people posting links to their fur affinity pages, and I was curious. I eventually made an account there and began drawing furries for the first time. This was during high school, and that was where I fell in love with the idea of having your own fursona. Now, I didn't know what to pick for my fursona, but I remember how much I loved Huskies and the color blue. So I slapped those 2 things together and made Fluke. I loved drawing Fluke and role-playing with him, and I commissioned a lot of art of him for years. So to put these 2 things together, I was a closet furry in high school who loved music and drawing, but I didn't know what to do for the rest of my life. Once I graduated high school, I decided to take a gap year to think about what I wanted to do. I really wanted to get into art school, but my parents subtly convinced me that life as an artist would be a lot of hustling and not great pay. I took their advice and ended up not applying to art school. I finally asked my dad what he think I should do for the rest of my life. Being a retired veteran of the US Air Force, he subtly tells me that the Air Force has been good to him, and it's a stable lifestyle. I think long and hard about that, knowing that my artsy self would not fit in with the expectations the military would require of me. But I decided on it anyways. Just like when I was a kid, I love the feeling of not knowing where I will be taken, of the discomfort of moving around and changes, and the adventures that comes along with it. So I ended up joining the US Air Force. Now this is the same time that I came out to my sister as being gay. The whole time in high school I was never interested in dating because it just seemed like too much work, and there was no attraction to girls then. And dating a guy in high school wasn't even in the question. My parents are very religious. My dad actually retired from the United States Air Force when we moved to Colorado and became a pastor. So there was no way that I could have dated a guy in high school. And there was no way that I could have comfortably came out to him that I was gay. That was why I wanted to tell my sister and let her be in charge of breaking it to the parents. I remember going for a long drive with her, just talk, and that was when I told her. I was so happy to hear that she was accepting, and we both shed a few tears because I was expressing my genuine feelings and how hurt I was being stuck in the closet. I felt like I needed to tell someone before being shipped off to the military, else I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Like maybe the military will have changed me and I would be even more in the closet than I am now. Maybe I'll never have the chance to tell my sister how I'm feeling at this very moment ever again. I had to tell her, and I'm so happy that I did. I remember coming back home to a letter. It was from my dad. It said how much I was off track and that I needed to come back, and he's sorry to have failed me as a parent. I felt so hurt, not only for myself, but also for him. I'm a very empathetic person in that I feel the hurt that other people feel. And when it's your own parents, the cut was just too deep. When I came home to them, the day before I was going to be shipped out, I remember I locked myself in my room and refused to talk to them. I just felt so lonely and detached. But I was ready to move on and become my own adult. That was the first day that I became an individual, apart from my parents. And it was terrifying. I get shipped off to the military, and the slate was wiped clean. I was stationed in South Dakota, in the middle of nowhere, for nearly 4 years. At first I hated being in the middle of nowhere, but I realized the beauty of the landscape in isolation, and especially the friends I made while I was there. I loved just getting in my car and driving. It was my alone time. As an introvert, I never feel more recharged as I am when I'm driving through someplace new. I remember I drove up to Wyoming to get to Yellowstone and was just going to camp out in my car. However, my car ran out of coolant halfway up the mountain and started smoking in the hood. I freaked out, pulled over, turned the car off, and jumped out thinking that I was going to explode. It didn't explode, but there was a hole in the coolant hose that made all the coolant leak out. That meant no heat. Even worse, there was no signal up there. Stranded and exhausted, I set up a blanket in the back seat and fell asleep. I woke up at 4 a.m. to frosted windows on the inside of my car. It was from the condensation of my breath settling on the windows and freezing. I eventually got up, put my car on neutral, and coasted back down the mountain to a little repair shop where they replaced the hose, and I went back home. I remember stepping back into my dormitory and thinking, that was so terrifying. But it was so exhilarating. I wanted to have adventures like that over and over again. 2015 comes around and I'm trudging along doing my Air Force job, construction work. I didn't like the job, but it was something that paid the bills. One of my coworkers shows me a picture of this poster about these auditions for some show choir by the Air Force for the Air Force. They apparently were a yearly rotating group of individuals that performed at military bases all around the world. He said I should audition. That same day, my parents called me up and told me about auditions opening up for this group of traveling veterans. It was the same group. I decided to look into it and realized it was Tops in Blue. A little insight, my family grew up watching Tops in Blue shows every year when they would come around, and we loved their shows. There were so many talented singers and performers, and they were all in the Air Force. It was a no-brainer for me to audition. So I sent in a video of me playing guitar and singing one of my favorite songs. A few days pass, and then my boss comes over to me and tells me to fill out a form because I'm flying to Texas for 10 days for auditions. I remember how overwhelmingly ecstatic I was. 10 days of auditioning and dozens of amazing friends made later, I return back to my base. A week passes and I get a letter from Tops in Blue welcoming me to the 2015 to 2016 World Tour. I made it in. So what happens is they pull you from your Air Force job and they put you in this temporary duty as a performer with Tops in Blue. It's a seasonal thing, a year, and after that year you are returned to your original job. My shop was prepared to let me go and the transition was smooth. 2015 ended up being one of the best years in my life. We put together an hour-and-a-half long show of top 40 hits and songs throughout the decade with a 10-piece band starring 20 vocalists, which included me. We danced and sang and flashed big smiles to audiences from 100 to 20,000 people at a time, traveling from Japan to Germany to Portugal. In a single year, we traveled to 15 different countries and performed 72 shows. I spent New Year's in Rome and ate hot pots in Korea and drank sake in Japan, rode mopeds in Guam and biked around London. But like all good things, it had to come to an end. Once the tour concluded, I returned back to my dorm in South Dakota, a different person. I was supercharged, and I felt like I had so much creativity to give. I just needed an outlet. But reality of the day-to-day 9-to-5 job life returned, and I was back being a construction worker for 2 more years. In the back of my mind, I wanted out. I wanted to move to a city that had more people, more things to do, more opportunities. So in 2017, I get out of active duty and I moved to San Francisco, California. I remember the feeling of moving again, and it hit hard when I looked in the rearview window of my U-Haul truck and saw South Dakota fading in the background. It was time for a new chapter, and I was charging full speed ahead. Furry-wise, I was pretty quiet. I had put my art on pause during these couple years, but I was still in love with the fandom. I had discovered this compilation clip of a furry convention for the very first time, and after seeing just how much fun these completely normal people are having in their furry costumes, I immediately wanted to immerse myself in it. I wanted a fursuit. I wanted to show off my creativity in a fursuit. Luckily, a few of my furry friends in South Dakota were in on this too, and we all worked together to make Fluke 1.0. I give the majority of the credit to my friend Red, because he carved the head and helped make the duct tape dummy and show me what to do next. And thus, I got to compete in my very first furry dance competition. I got to feel what it was like being up on stage once more, and it was exhilarating. I loved every bit of it, and I wanted more and more of it. I met so many great friends during that convention as well, but I think the most significant person I had the privilege of meeting was my future boyfriend, Tyrox. I remember it like the back of my paw. It was at Further Confusion 2018 in the Headless Lounge. We talked as if we were 2 perfect strangers, but little did we know that we would be meeting again and again at the local furry house parties and raves in the San Francisco Bay Area. Moving to San Francisco, I was ready to make big mistakes. I put $8,000 on a car that was totaled a few months into owning it. I fell in love with someone who didn't love me back and had a very messy breakup, and I struggled to pay rent with the high prices of the Bay Area. But there was one thing that made all my pains cease, and that was meeting the love of my life. I wanted to be frank with this new boy that I was hanging out with. I was broken from a relationship that had failed just a week prior, but I did love being with him, so I just straight up told him, if we really like each other and want to be more involved, then we should just call it dating. And a little later on, we decided to become boyfriends. 2.5 years passed, and we couldn't be more happy than we are now. I love you, Tyrox, and I don't plan on being with anyone else the rest of my life. So I moved to San Francisco to go to school, working with computers because I figured I'm pretty decent around them. 2 years into my degree, I decided to make a YouTube account, and I wanted to make a parody of an unboxing while in fursuit video, and it got good reception. I figured that people like watching a cute dog doing random things, so I continued. My channel began to catch more and more attention until I started getting recognized by the bigger YouTube names and began collaborating with them. I eventually got invited to perform in a show hosted by my friend Majira called Furry Talks at one of my favorite conventions. Not only that, but my dancing took off as well, and I've been competing, judging, and hosting dance competitions all around the US. Everything seems to be growing into this large crescendo, and I'm buckled down and ready to ride out the excitement. I've learned a lot from my past on how to commit my passions, and I'm absolutely in love with showing other people my creativity. At first it was singing and playing guitar, then it was photography on DeviantArt, then art through Furfinity, then singing and dancing with Hobson Blue, then performing on stage in Fursuit, and now it's sitting in front of a camera and posting weekly for all you here on YouTube. I don't believe my creativity will stop here, nor do I want it to. I'm so very glad to share this chapter of my life with you, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this creativity leads to next, whether it be through this platform or onto the next. This is Fluke Husky, and I'm signing out. Also, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for 100,000.